Charles had lived on his farm his entire life. His father had walked these fields, his grandfather before him, and Charles believed he knew every inch of soil, every stone, every fence post. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Daily Dose, like, and share this video. The land had always been steady, unchanging, a place where the rhythm of life was as predictable as the sunrise. But one morning, everything changed. It began just before dawn. A low rumble stirred Charles awake, at first so faint he mistook it for thunder. But when the bed shook and the walls began to rattle, his heart lurched into his throat. Earthquakes didn't happen here. Tornadoes, maybe. Storms, yes, but not this. The old house groaned, beams creaking under pressure, as if the entire structure was fighting to hold itself together. He clung to the doorframe, every second stretching into eternity, until finally the trembling ceased. Silence fell, eerie and unnatural, as though the world was holding its breath. Charles stepped outside, barefoot on the damp earth. His porch was split with jagged cracks, running like veins into his fields. But it was what lay beyond that froze him in his tracks. In the middle of his cornfield, where stalks had once swayed, was a gaping wound in the earth. A sinkhole, massive and unnatural, yawning wide enough to swallow a house. Dust and smoke curled upward from its depths, carrying with them a strange sulfuric stench that stung his nose. Without wasting a moment, he called his best friend and neighbor, Tom. When Tom arrived and caught sight of the hole, he let out a low whistle. Trees that once stood firm now lay crumpled at the bottom, their roots twisted in the collapse, and lining the walls of the sinkhole were strange streaks of red soil, glowing faintly under the morning sun, almost like veins of fire trapped beneath the ground. As they circled the edge, Tom crouched, scooping up a handful of dirt. He hissed in surprise. It was warm, unnaturally warm. Then they noticed the southern edge of the hole sloped downward, forming what looked eerily like an entrance. A tunnel. Charles hesitated, but curiosity won. Together the men descended carefully, boots crunching on loose gravel, the sulfuric stench growing stronger with each step. The tunnel stretched wide, large enough for both of them to stand comfortably, its jagged walls streaked with red soil and black veins that seemed to pulse faintly under the beam of Charles's flashlight. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. The walls bore markings, deliberate lines and grooves, too precise to be random. Scattered along the edges of the tunnel were debris, tangled roots, loose stones, and something metallic half buried in dirt. A rusted pipe, cracked and leaking thick black liquid that smelled like oil. This wasn't natural. This had been built. Then they found the beam, half buried in soil, charred and splintered, a wooden support with faint letters scorched into its side. MLB.co. The rest unreadable. Charles and Tom exchanged a look. Someone had been here before. Someone had carved this cavern under his land. The air grew hotter, heavier. Shallow puddles shimmered with a yellowish film, reeking of chemicals. The sound of dripping water echoed overhead, each drop a reminder that the river ran close by. If the ceiling gave way, the tunnel could flood in seconds. Yet, beyond the dripping and the hum of their flashlights, another sound emerged. A low, rhythmic vibration, faint but steady, mechanical, alive. Charles's skin prickled. This wasn't abandoned. Someone was still down here. He and Tom exchanged a nervous glance. Neither spoke, but both knew the same truth. They weren't alone. Their light swept ahead into the darkness, but the tunnel stretched endlessly, curving deeper into the earth. Finally, Charles whispered, "We turn back." "Not yet. Not like this." Tom nodded. They retreated, careful not to disturb the unstable walls. At the surface, Charles' heart still pounded. He glanced back at the sinkhole one last time. It wasn't just a collapse of earth. It was a doorway to something long buried, something meant to stay hidden. But now the secret was exposed, and they had seen too much to walk away. As the sun rose higher, Charles noticed something clinging to Tom's boots, a thick black tar-like substance, sticky and foul. Oil. His stomach sank. This wasn't just some old tunnel. It was an operation. Someone had been drilling beneath his land, hiding it all this time. That's when the ground shook again. A violent boom split the silence, and smoke spiraled into the sky from the far edge of the property. Another collapse. Or worse, an explosion. Charles clenched his fists. Whoever MLB was, they were still active. And now it was personal. Charles and Tom didn't waste any time. They rushed to Tom's kitchen, the acrid smell of oil still clinging to their clothes. Charles spread the scorched wooden beam across the table, his finger tracing the half-burned letters. MLB Tapane. Whoever these people are, they're drilling illegally, Charles muttered. And they're blasting my land apart to do it. Tom nodded grimly. And if they're willing to blow up half your field, they won't stop here. This whole valley could be at risk. Fueled by anger, they gathered tools, gloves, jars, cameras. Evidence was what they needed now. When they returned to the sinkhole, the air was heavier than before, thick with sulfur and oil. The tunnel walls dripped with black residue as they followed the leaking pipes deeper. Every step echoed like a warning, but they pressed on. Soon, the faint glow of light appeared ahead. Charles crouched, signaling Tom to stay quiet. As they crept closer, the truth revealed itself. A massive machine, rusted but still churning, pumped oil through cracked pipes that ran like veins into the earth. Men in blue jumpsuits moved between panels, adjusting valves and monitoring gauges. And there it was, stitched on their uniforms in bold letters. MLB. Charles's pulse quickened. The Midland Land Boring Company. He had heard the name once before, tied to shady rumors of unauthorized drilling. Now he had proof. He snapped photo after photo, capturing the machine, the pipes, and the workers, each image a nail in the company's coffin. When one of the workers turned and squinted into the darkness, Charles and Tom slipped back silently, hearts racing, clutching their evidence. By the time they reached the surface, they knew exactly what they had to do. The sheriff's office listened carefully as Charles laid out the evidence. Photos of the oil-stained soil, jars filled with black liquid, images of the machine and the workers themselves. It was undeniable. Within hours, deputies and environmental officers swarmed the farmland, descending into the tunnels with flashlights and weapons drawn. The workers didn't resist. Some even confessed, pointing fingers higher up the chain. Within days, the leaders of MLB were exposed, arrested, and charged with illegal drilling, environmental destruction, and reckless endangerment. Their equipment was seized, the tunnels sealed, and restoration crews arrived to scrub the soil and reinforce the riverbanks. Charles stood by his field, watching as trucks hauled away the machines that had poisoned his land. The tunnels were gone now, filled and sealed, but the scars remained. His crops had been ruined, and for weeks he worried his family's legacy might be lost forever. But nature has a way of healing. A year later, the soil once tainted by oil and sulfur had enriched itself, like fertilizer born from disaster. His fields bloomed with the largest crop he had ever seen. Corn stretched taller than before, and the river, once at risk, flowed stronger along reinforced banks. Neighbors often asked if he regretted finding the tunnel, if he wished it had all just stayed buried. Charles would shake his head, looking out over his land. Secrets like that don't stay buried forever. Better to face them head-on than let them fester beneath your feet. As the sun set over the farm one evening, he walked the field with Tom, the golden light rippling across the green stalks. The nightmare was behind him, but the lesson remained. Even the most peaceful land can hide dangerous truths, and sometimes it takes courage to drag those secrets into the light. Charles clenched the old beam in his hand, the one scorched with MLB, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been saved. His family's land was his again, and it was thriving. And in the quiet breeze that rustled the crops, Charles finally felt peace.